Welcome to the F3 Podcast,
where we talk food, football, and fantasy football.
Hello again. Welcome back to another episode of the F3 Podcast. I'm Chef Jonathan Fraser, and I'm here with
Erin Fraser, otherwise known as Alishtek.
Welcome back, Erin. I know you had a great week away from me, right?
Thank you. I know this time last week, I was recording poolside. This week, I'm definitely indoors a little bit more, back here in the Comox Valley. You know, it'd be really nice to take this podcast on the road and just, go to the team that we're talking about of the week. Hey, that's not a bad gig, but we're not there in the South quite yet. But maybe it's a dream of this podcast.
We're definitely going to have to open up a Patreon page to get that happening, for sure. Well, at this moment, we have Team of the Week, and it was our team that was supposed to be last week. So who are we talking about this week?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So last week we called a little bit of an audible, as we said, just because I happened to be in the Tampa Bay area. So we swapped teams last week, and we talked about the Buccaneers last week. And this week we are talking about the newest, I guess we could say, team in the NFL. The Houston Texans.
The Houston Texans. I'm excited. So we're in week 14 of
I can't believe that. Yeah.
Of highlights, right?
That
Things are happening out there. Now, let's jump into your fantasy league. How are you doing right now?
Oh boy. Well, if you hear the tension in my voice, I'm trying to relax a little bit. Last week was a frustrating, very typical emotional fantasy roller coaster last week. I lost by 2 points. This week is looking just as tight. Currently, I'm up by a handful of points, but it's fantasy and anything can happen. So we will see how that goes. Just overall, the past 2 weeks have not been fantastic. Let's say that. I've been looking at some of my players, and the players that I thought I would be able to get a few more points out of have just not really provided a lot for me. So that's been a big struggle. As well, this week was a little bit rough for running backs this week, because two of my top running backs, Christian McCaffrey and Rico Dowell, they were both on bye weeks, so that wasn't helpful at all. And along with Chuba Hubbard. So not the best for running back situation this week, which might explain my current fantasy score, which is not super great, but I am winning. But we'll see how the week plays out. I was a little bit too confident last week going into Thanksgiving, NFL Thanksgiving weekend, going, this is going to be a great week, and I ended up losing by 2. So,
well, I'm enjoying right now that we're actually recording in the halftime of the Texans versus the Chiefs at the moment.
Absolutely.
So, of course, Texans are up right now by 10, but we'll see what happens. Because things churns pretty quick.
Speaking of breaking news, the game is now tied 10-all.
10-all. Okay. Well, things change fast, right? So we'll see what happens with the end of that game, and I think it should be a good one. But let's start on a little bit about what's going on in fantasy right now. Who burned you the most last week?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think, I can't believe I'm actually saying this, and these words are coming out of my mouth, but this week and last week, just looking at overall fantasy points, I haven't been getting a ton out of Patrick Mahomes, and this week is very much a testament to that. I think currently, as we're recording this, going into the third quarter of the Houston-Kansas City game, I think I've only got about 7 fantasy points from Mahomes. He's just has not been playing exceptionally well this past few weeks. So that's been one where I know I've got Jared Goff on the bench, and he had a pretty good fantasy turnout this week, about 19 fantasy points. And there was a part of me during the week where it did, cross my mind, swap out Mahomes and Jared Goff and perhaps bench Mahomes. And maybe I should have listened to my gut.
Sometimes you just have to play with that gut and see where it takes you.
I do, right? Absolutely.
Yeah. And so who would be the team member who's been really carrying you this week for sure?
Well, this week was actually a little bit of a good week for receivers, actually. Jameson Williams for Detroit really got me some good points, about 14 fantasy points in their really nice win over Dallas this week. So that's been really nice. Even Cooper Kupp, who generally isn't like a huge fantasy points person. The Seahawks just absolutely destroyed Atlanta this week. So he got a touchdown in that game and got some good fantasy points. So that was really good. Of course, Jalen Waddle for Miami. He was really good and fairly consistent fantasy player, and was really good on the fantasy charts as well, getting about 15.5 fantasy points.
Right. And then looking at your opponent today, who's been his number one best player out there.
Yeah, so it was interesting. I was looking at his lineup going into the week, and one of the players that, kind of had a bit of maybe a yellow flag or an asterisk next to his name was Lamar Jackson, because he was dealing with a bit of an ankle injury. And I'm just wondering how he was going to show this weekend. But, Baltimore did lose to Pittsburgh 22-27. Scores really don't matter. Game scores don't matter in fantasy. So Jackson got about 21 fantasy points. So that was a nice one for him.
Nice one for him.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, looking forward to next week, week 15. Where are you thinking with some players? Are you do some change up on your line, or what's the plan?
I think I'm going to bring back for sure McCaffrey and Hubbard back into my running back lineup, because McCaffrey has been an incredible fantasy player this year and an incredible player in general, but particularly if you've got him on your fantasy roster, he has been pretty consistently solid throughout this entire year. So definitely getting McCaffrey back up into the lineup off of the bench, and that hopefully all the bad bye weeks are done that way. If you have, and I unfortunately do not, but if you have Jackson Smith and Jimba for the Seahawks, he is the leading wide receiver in the NFL. He has just absolutely blown up this season and beating records left, right, and center. And it's been really incredible to watch, because especially with the Seahawks, perhaps I'm a bit biased, but seeing how they sort of molded and grew DK Metcalf, and Metcalf was, predicted to be the next best, greatest thing is in the wide receiver position. And he was absolutely like a incredible physical specimen of a receiver, and he was really good. But Njimba is just incredible, and I would not be surprised by any stretch of the imagination if he gets offensive player of the year this year. So
that's a big statement.
If you have him on your fantasy team, you are doing well.
Let's get into something that is important about with scores, is what's happening around the league.
Yeah. So like we had mentioned in the previous podcast, week 13, and we are in the middle of week 14 right now, but week 13 is always a huge week in the NFL because it is American Thanksgiving week.
Right.
And it's a great week because you get a bunch of games kind of spread out, and they're not all bunched together on Sunday. So there's a couple of games on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Monday. So really, like all weeks, really interesting. But the Broncos extended their win streak to 5 games, so they're doing exceptionally well. Panthers, Carolina defeated the Rams, which was a bit of a surprise. So that, like I think I've mentioned previously, that the NFC West is one of the more interesting divisions in football to watch, because there's always those 3 of the 4 teams, I should say, have been really, really strong this year, with San Francisco, Seattle, and Los Angeles Rams battling it out. And so with the Rams loss, and Seattle is just playing exceptionally well this year, it's going to make for a really interesting division matchup. Unfortunately for Seattle, the Rams won. They have the division lead out of the games that they've played, but we'll see what the last couple of weeks in the NFL brings. But that was an interesting game to note, just because of how tightly bunched those 3 teams in that division are. Additionally, the Patriots, they were the first team to get to 11 wins. Keep an eye on them.
Big statement.
That is a big statement. Yeah, exactly. With Lamar Jackson, with his ankle injury, they lost to Pittsburgh. So it was always interesting just to kind of keep an eye and see if he was going to play this week, what his status was going to be. And he did end up playing, but they did end up losing. So
we'll just keep an eye on that and see how that all happens.
Exactly.
Right? What team really stood out for you this week?
This past week, I would say, the Broncos are doing really, really well. Curious to see how they're going to end up. Along with, I don't want to admit it because I've never been a huge Patriots fan, but the Patriots are doing really well as well. So those are 2 teams that I'm going to be really curious how they finish off the year and see exactly if they come out on top.
It's always a big thing, and part of the game is, and the worst part of the game is injuries out there.
Oh, yes.
And when you see someone get hurt, you see that big hit, and you just have that cringe in there. What's happening in the league this week with that?
Yeah, Jackson was probably one of them. Aaron Rodgers' injury, everybody was kind of keeping an eye on him as well. He had a pretty good game, so that's been really interesting to see. There were some questions around whether he was going to come back this week, so he did come back. I know Nick Chubb this week got injured during the game, so I don't think he is returning to the Houston, Kansas City game right now. So kind of keeping an eye on that. And that's big, perhaps a good segue into the team that we're going to be talking about. That team their offense certainly has been riddled with some injuries. So CJ Stroud, their quarterback, was injured, went through concussion protocol. So, when you're getting this far into the season, inevitably injuries rear their ugly head.
Of course. And so this is my thing too, is I think I was asking you a little bit earlier while watching the game, like at this point, if you're feeling a little down, do you keep playing or do you pull back a little bit to save yourself for playoffs?
No, you definitely, there's no such thing. I think you're in that's the only situation where I could ever think as a coach, if ever you're in the very last week of the season and you've got a guaranteed playoff spot locked up, maybe that's when you don't play all of your starters. But it is a really hard decision because you don't want to not play hard because every victory counts, and you don't want, there's so much even in the psychology of sports about how you play and things like that. But I don't think you'd ever ease up to avoid injury. It's, such an incredibly violent game as it is, and players know that going in.
I guess it's time that we move on a little bit and let's get on to our team of the week. And yes, as you were saying, one of the newest teams in the league.
Yes, if not the newest. That's exactly right. Yeah, well, it's kind of weird. Their history, the Houston Texans, they are and they aren't. So it's kind of, they've got a weird history lesson, I suppose, is how it is. So I remember way back in the day, this was, quite a few years ago, that they were actually named the Houston Oilers, not to be confused with the Edmonton Oilers, different sport altogether, but they were the Houston Oilers. They were around from kind of the mid 60s to the mid 90s. Then they ended up moving to Nashville, and then eventually they became what is known now as the Tennessee Titans. So then back in, I think it was around the turn of the millennium, about 25 years ago, the Houston Texans, as we know them now, came back into the league, and now that's where they are right now. They are now known as the Houston Texans. And also, as a side note, trivia question, they are only one of 4 teams in the NFL to have never gone to a Super Bowl.
Never been to a Super Bowl.
Never been.
So what are your chances for them coming this year?
Probably not very good. Which is kind of sad to say if they're our team of the week. But with the team that they have now with Stroud, who was drafted 2nd overall a few years ago, I remember watching him get drafted in college. He's developed as a player. I mean, his first year, I believe he was nominated and even ended up winning Offensive Rookie of the Year. Definitely a lot of potential in that team. I think it's going to take a little bit longer in terms of growing. They've got a really strong defense. They have to work on their offense a little bit more. So maybe next year we might see them going a little bit deeper into the playoffs. We'll see how this year brings them. There is a chance they could make it to the playoffs, but in terms of any Super Bowl contention, I'm not a betting person, but I would say if I had to put money on it, no, they're not making it
they're
that
not
far
quite.
This year.
Because they're really a younger team, is that what you're saying?
They are. I mean, in every sort of sense of the word, they definitely are. When you have a quarterback like Stroud, who's only a couple years into the league, you really have to develop them, right? And so he's been going through that. Like I said earlier, unfortunately, he had a concussion injury, so the last few weeks he wasn't able to play. Their offense is where they do need a little bit more work. Their defense, even against Kansas City, watching that, it's been really impressive to see. I think, actually, they have one of, if not the lowest, league low 265 yards per game is what their defense lets up, which is incredibly impressive.
Wow, it is impressive.
Yeah,
right?
It is. I think I read somewhere that there's a 60% chance of them making the playoffs, so a little bit more than I gave them credit for, but that's maybe as far as they
Well, and that's something we've noticed this year in the league is that defense has been very important and
Absolutely.
has really been a big thing in a lot of games.
Definitely, yep, and this is no exception.
And not good for you when it comes to fantasy points.
Not good for any fantasy players, let's be honest. I think I used that as my excuse a few weeks ago when I was like, I'm not playing that well. It was a defensive week in football, but I don't know how much longer I can keep that up for.
Yeah, well, and I mean, that's going to really cost you points, right? Because all your points
Exactly.
go from offense. And when you go up against a team like like Houston, they're going to throw up that defense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, they like other teams, their offense has definitely suffered from the injury bug, but you can't use that excuse for too long, unfortunately. It's my favorite segment coming up.
Anything else to put on about the Houston Texans?
Well, I think a lot will depend on the result of this Kansas City game. If they're able to pull out a win against Kansas City, that basically seals the playoff fate for Kansas City and puts the Texans in a really good position. So this Texans KC game is extremely important in the big picture.
So it could be a big changes in the AFC.
I think so.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get on to what makes Houston Houston.
Yes.
In the food scene, for sure. And this is maybe why their players are happy and young and full of energy.
Because they have some good food to enjoy.
It's a good food, yeah. So I was looking at that, like what makes Houston food different from the rest of Texas, right?
Yeah, correct. So just when you think of Texas, I think very stereotypically, perhaps, when you say Texas food, you think of barbecue.
Exactly. Definitely thinking barbecue. You're thinking grilling. You're thinking getting those, nice rubs on there. And it's not just like that Tex-Mex sort of atmosphere, right? So I was looking at this and I realized reading up and doing more research on it, that the city is full of fusion, right? Because there is it's one of the larger areas for immigration, right?
Right.
Yeah. So there's a lot of immigrants in there. So a lot of Vietnamese, Nigerians, Indians, a lot of Cajun cuisine in there.
Right.
And of course, being so close to Mexico.
Yep.
And of course, that Gulf Coast influence, right? You've got some amazing sort of scenes of all these foods coming together. So being one of those areas, you've got so many great foods to pull from and seafoods to pull in there. True. Just to make a beautiful melting pot. So
it's amazing when you think of Houston. I never think of a cultural melting pot. That's not something I had normally associated with the city.
Yeah, but when you start looking into it, you're like, wow, there is just a really big group of community in there. And you know what? And what happens when people come in from other countries and stuff? They bring their foods with you. And then, of course, when they come and they bring their flavors and tastes, then they find the flavors and tastes around, and it becomes like a beautiful melting pot. So, I think it just makes food that much better.
Absolutely.
So anyways, I kind of got into a few things there, and I found a few items that I thought we'd go over that I think would be good sort of tailgating food or just food to have that sort of would represent
the area well.
The area. Yeah. So I was looking at this Vietnamese Cajun crawfish, right? Like a signature Houston boil, spicy, garlicky sauce with lime and a Southeastern Asian aroma to it, right? So I thought, that's a little bit out there,
I would never think of Vietnamese and Cajun coming together, but that's a really unique combination.
Yeah. So I was looking at this dish. I was like, that would be amazing. And it's something you could have with a group together, of course. And then, of course, let's go the whole Texan style. Let's go some beef ribs, right? Big ribs, juicy, smoky, just that massive piece of meat.
Everything's bigger in Texas.
Bigger in Texas. And then, of course, I was thinking with the Gulf Coast, you've got the shrimp po' boys, right?
Right.
Nothing better than that. Lightly fried shrimp and a soft roll with a nice spicy mayo.
We've talked about po' boys in other markets, NFL markets, Louisiana and things like that, but that's kind of a very southern dish.
Southern dish, for sure. And so that's why I was looking at that one. And then, of course, I was looking at a barbecued loaded baked potato, right? If you think about taking some brisket, some pulled pork, stuffing that in a potato with cheese, sour cream, that's a definite Houston classic for that area for sure. And I thought these would all be great items. But then I was thinking, you know what? Let's really look at Houston. And honestly, at the end of the day, it goes back to the barbecue. But I'm going to do a Houston style smoked brisket. Right? Geez, I love briskets and I love smoking with briskets. It's low and slow, heavy on a black pepper bark, right? Which is that nice crusting on the outside of it. And then just that lots of seasoning, rich aromas, and that smoke that just hits hard, right? So I just thought that would be really the game day winner, is a nice smoked brisket, Houston style, right? And then, of course, you've got every avenue to all of a sudden eat that on. You can eat it straight up, like just slice off against the grain, nice chunks of it because it's nice and juicy and tender if you've done it right. Or then, of course, slicing it on either sandwiches, on sliders. Let's talk about tacos. And then, of course, just on your good old nachos, right? It's just a football fan favorite.
So if you were to do this Texas-style brisket and you wanted it for either your game watching party or if you wanted it for tailgating, do you have to start it the day before?
Oh my God, this is going to be adventure with everything, right? The work is there. First of all, you've got to trim down your brisket. You want a good quarter inch thick cap on the top of it. So trim it down a little bit. And then you're going to season it up and you're going to let it rest and let that rub really penetrate into that meat. And then, of course, it's about low and slow. So you want a preheated smoker and you're probably going to around 250 and usually either like hickory or mesquite wood inside there just to really give you those real flavors. And that's usually cooking for about 6 to 7 hours. And of course, you're probably going to, at the end of it, wrap it in butcher's paper or even foil you can use. And then cook it at the smoker to get that nice internal temperature of about 203, 205, which is probably another 4 to 6 hours.
So you're definitely not doing this on game day.
This is definitely not a game day. But here's the deal is you get this done and you get it ready. It's really easy to reheat.
Right.
And then you're ready to go for game day. So
you're making this on Saturday when you're watching college football. And then you're enjoying it on Sunday when you're watching NFL football.
You're starting this on Friday night.
And this is a weekend commitment.
This is full weekend commitment, right? Because even once you've got it all done, you've got it cooked off there, wrapped and cooked off there for that. You got to let it rest, right? Like meats need resting.
Right.
So just letting it sit there, letting all those juices soak right back in. There is nothing better than a beautiful smoked brisket.
A beautiful Texas smoke.
You betcha. Well, I think that hits me for the food of the week. So maybe we can do a little bit of recap here.
Yeah.
Fantasy highlight for you of this week?
Oh, fantasy highlight. I am going to say, this is a little bit of a dark horse, but I'm going to say Cooper Kupp. My expectation was pretty low for him this week.
Really?
Yeah, and I made a choice to keep him on, not to bench him, just looking at some of my other wide receivers, but he got me some solid fantasy points. He caught a touchdown this week, so I'm going to say that's my dark horse surprise.
All right, and the big football headline this week?
Oh boy. Well, if Kansas City loses, so this is kind of like almost a choose your own adventure headline, but if Kansas City loses, I would say that's the biggest headline because I think that basically, maybe not mathematically, but practically eliminates them from the play.
And of course, our food pick is the Houston style smoked brisket. Nothing loving like that on a barbecue. You ready for this?
Spinny wheel?
Spinny wheel time. Here we go.
Oh, look at that. We are moving from the deep south to the north, to the the middle of the country, but definitely heading north. Minneapolis, the Minnesota Vikings.
Minnesota Vikings. This sounds fun.
I like this.
All right.
It's a good. I like it. We haven't gone that north. Well, I guess we've done Green Bay, but I do like the Vikings as a whole in terms of a football team, and they've got a lot of Swedish influence in Minneapolis and Minnesota in general. So I have a feeling that might play a little bit of a factor in their food.
Oh, yeah, no. Yeah. I'm thinking about when we were lucky enough to have the Norwegian cooking team, or not the...
it's the Swedish cooking team.
The Swedish cooking team. It was
at a national cooking conference that we went to a few years ago.
We had some amazing dishes from Glavlocks. You got hooked on celery roots.
It was really good. We had a great elevator story, which we'll share next week.
So lots of fun times there, and we'll hopefully we'll have some good meals for you.
I'm excited. I like the Vikings. Let's talk about them.
Well, that's your F3 fix for this week. All about football, food, and fantasy.